Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. On this episode, I'm joined by my friend from the other side of the mountain, Kenneth Andres. Kenneth is the trade show director for IFTD. He shares his fly fishing journey, his thoughts on how trade shows have evolved over the last 20 years, and what folks can expect at IFTD in Salt Lake City at the end of March. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And as we continue to create and distribute more diverse content, you may want to consider downloading our iOS or our Android app. We organize our content by category so you can go straight to the content that interests you the most. The apps are free and the links are in the show notes. Alternatively, just search The Articulate Fly where you get your mobile apps. And our friend Blaine Chocolate has launched a new round of online tying classes for March. He'll be teaching folks how to tie his bucktail changer, as well as demystifying tying the jerk changer. The classes will be held live on March 12th, and all the details are in the show notes. Space is limited, so don't delay. Now, on to our interview. Well, Ken, welcome to The Articulate Fly.
Hey, Marvin.
It's good to have you on, and we have a tradition on The Articulate Fly. We always ask all of our guests to share their earliest fishing memory.
Well, I grew up in the mountains, and my dad was not much of a freshwater fisherman, and we would go to Virginia Beach and fish out of Rudy Inlet, off the bridge there, and I think we mostly caught bluefish and speckled trout, but it was a lot of fun. I know there was a lot of horseshoe crabs out there too in those times, but those are my earliest memories of going fishing.
Yeah, very neat. When did you come to the dark side of fly fishing?
It was probably my junior year of high school, and a couple of guys were, and this is probably 89, 90, 91. And they like to go fly fishing, and we had rivers all around us, and limited in what I was in my experience in freshwater fishing, and we'd go bass fishing, but we would go out to the Jackson River and start fly fishing, and it was a lot of fun. I liked it a lot. I didn't do it enough. Didn't really get into it big until after my senior year in high school.
Yeah, and so was the Orvis store already in Roanoke at that time?
Yeah, and that's actually so I went right before the summer before I went to college. I ended up working at I take it back. The Christmas of my freshman year of college, I worked at the Orvis store to kind of help out over the holidays in downtown Roanoke, and I loved it. And ended up coming back from college and then working in the summer the following year for Orvis, and just loved it. I just at that point I was in deep.
Yeah, and the funny thing is if you're in the know, in Salem is where they have their distribution center, and they've got an outlet there.
Yeah, and so. We're kind of an Orvis family. My brother worked at the outlet. There was one downtown, and then there was the big one out in Salem, and he kind of floated between the two. And I worked at the retail shop downtown in Roanoke.
Yeah, and I think that the rodeo grounds that are near the outlet are actually the same ones that were in the movie Borat.
That's right. Yeah, they have a pretty big. They have a big trout rodeo out there every year, which is really neat. And a lot of kids get to catch some trout for the first time, which is awesome.
Yeah, very neat. So you started fly fishing late in high school, or kind of eating up with it in college. Who are some of the folks that have mentored you on your fly fishing journey, and what did they teach you?
So I'd say, locally, I had the benefit of being around some great fishermen. Robert Bryant was the manager of the store, and and at the time, I thought you could only catch trout with a 408, and it had to be on a dry fly, and I had all these restrictions on catching fish, and And Robert kind of opened my eyes and kind of simplified it. And, I said, well, Robert, what are you going to use? Number, 18 Blue Wing Olive. And he's like, hey, I looked at his box. We went fishing one day on the Smith, and he's like, use one of these little rusty Adams flies. And, he was a magician. He could catch fish, just knew where to put the fly. And that's where it kind of really demystified fly fishing for me. And so Robert was one of those. I had Harry Steves around me, locally. And, but, I spent a lot of time watching a lot of video at that shop. And I watched, Mel Kiger, Lee and Joan Wolfe, Stu App, Lefty Craig. And these are kind of in the peak, and Flip Hallett. Gosh, it was pretty cool. I just took it by the fire hose and went out and did what I could to replicate what I'd seen and learned.
Yeah, very, very cool. And I know for, Ken, probably the last 20 years or so, you've been in the trade show management business. And I think you've really kind of focused mostly on the outdoor industry. And I'm kind of curious, what attracted you to trade shows and how did you break into that game?
Well, I didn't go to school for it. That's for sure. I don't think anybody that's in a trade show business, back then would go to school to be in a trade show. I had a friend in Palm Beach. I transferred. I went to Hampden-Sydney College and then transferred to College of Charleston. That's a whole nother story. But I met a good buddy of mine. Well, he's still a good buddy of mine, and he was from Palm Beach. His dad ran a tile and stone show in Orlando, and they asked me to come down and help them with the show, and with the idea that my buddy would kind of be like the head guy, and I'd kind of be the general manager. And so they showed us kind of the ropes, and I got to go and work with foreign trade commissions in Spain or Europe and Spain and Italy, and learn the trade show business and the revenue side and expenditure side. So it was pretty neat. I really got a great vantage point on producing trade shows with them.
Yeah, and so you started there. You want to tell folks a little bit? I know you've done multiple shows, and I think probably your longest tenure was ICAST, right?
Yeah. So once I moved back I left that show I was covering, went back to Virginia, and I did a couple things, sold caterpillars and did that. And I thought, it's just not for me. I've been, moving so quickly in international trade that I took a job in DC and worked for a trade show company, got back in that business. And then, took a job with the American Sport Fishing Association, and which was great, and worked for them for 10 years, ran the trade show. And, when I got there, it was interesting how the show was being run. And I felt like there's a lot of things that we could change, and, change that and grew the show. But after ICAST, went to work for the water sports industry. I got hired for a for-profit show management company to help sales with Surf Expo. Then got hired by the firearms industry, and I did that for a couple of months, and I ended up leaving and going back to Emerald. And it was a great experience in the firearms industry. I love to hunt, and just wasn't the atmosphere for me. So, and then I came back to Emerald and ran an e-com show called Retail X, where I did that for a little bit, for a couple of years, and then back into the fly fishing industry here with AFFTA, and been doing that now for the last year and a half. So it's great to be back in fishing and amongst a lot of great brands and people that I've known for a long time.
Yeah, very cool. And, I've done some shows on a much smaller scale with the Federation, and I think it's, goes without saying that it's an understatement. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes to make events successful. What do you think most average attendees would be most surprised by that happens behind the scenes?
They don't know, right? I think the less you hear from attendees, whether it's about parking or pricing or whatever, the better the show, right? I think there's a lot that goes into contracting. I go into as a show producer, the idea is to partner with different vendors, and their idea is to help create revenue streams for their business, and it really creates kind of a huge economic impact for the community. So there's a lot to be said about trade shows and industry events and how it impacts the city. So there's a lot of things that people don't know that we do that are important.
Got it. And the other thing is, for every event, something doesn't go according to plan. What's your worst trade show horror story?
Man, where do I start? There's so many. And, the funny thing is that if I don't bring attention to it, then people typically don't know, right? And unless you really have, unless it's a really bad thing. I haven't had like anything that's been terrible where, we've had a keynote issue or, like a stage, thing falls or, a light, goes out or microphone goes out. But there have been some issues where I've had F&B for like a board meeting and, you have help and you empower these, your staff to take the lead and take charge. And we had a staff or a board meeting that the food was ordered for the wrong day. And I think a lot of these guys were hungry and really kind of waiting around. And I was thinking to myself, it was like 15 minutes before the meal was supposed to be served and nothing had shown up. And so I checked and we had to actually grab somebody else's lunch in the convention center and give it to these board members. And again, but they didn't know. Right. And so really with trade shows, it's a lot of problem solving. And so you kind of have to kind of keep your cool and know that there's a solution to everything. Might not be the best one, but there is an answer.
Yeah. So you've never had an experience like where you screwed up the M&Ms for Van Halen and they refused to perform?
No. And it's just funny because at ICAST, I had Easton Corbin, we had this country music concert one year and I had Easton Corbin and he had this list of things that he wanted. And then the next year we had Cole Swindell and he had this whole list of things that he wanted. And I looked at these riders and I was like, man, these guys want a lot of stuff. And I was like, what if I, I'm not being cheap, but like, what if I just kind of like not do everything in there? And you know what? People are pretty reasonable, It's not like it all had to be like white velour and vodka and whatever, but you got some beer in there and you got some food and people are pretty good about doing things. But I try to meet a lot of people's demands with those kinds of things. But it's a balancing act and it's a lot of relationships and trying to make sure that people are happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Ken, and putting aside COVID, what changes have you seen in the outdoor trade show industry during your career? So,
I think if I go back to the beginning of ICAP, and I always say this, and anybody that knows me will recognize this statement, is that there was a lot of gray-haired men in blue blazers with briefcases, right? And I felt like, distribution was kind of throttled down to, it was two-step, right? So you had to, these independent retailers had to go through a wholesaler, they had to go through different channels in order to get the product. And today that can still be true with some of the larger manufacturers. But as we've come down 15, 20 years, we're seeing a lot more direct-to-consumer manufacturers, promoting their product in a virtual landscape or in a social media landscape, and opportunities for for the consumer to buy product directly from the manufacturer. Now, a lot of those fulfillments come from the retail shops, so retailers aren't cut out altogether. But retailers have had to adapt to some of the changes, especially recently here with COVID, on how supply chain and market and product purchasing has happened here.
Yeah, and so kind of talking about COVID, do you think it's produced new changes or has just accelerated existing trends?
I think it's accelerated existing trends. Yeah, there's no question. Again, I'll go back to the kind of the beginning, and with ICAST, the biggest thing, the platform was like Twitter, right? So, and the show was still in Las Vegas. I thought, I'm going to just put this Twitter wall, and people are going to walk into the show and they'll see this Twitter wall, and all these tweets will come up, and maybe they'll see their tweets and they'll tweet about the show. And it's just so different now, right? The engagement's no longer just kind of in this micro community. There's this huge network now. And I guess it's always been there, but things have kind of been the conduits and everything has kind of been refined, and how information gets passed. So, COVID's really kind of changed a lot of things. It's kind of ripped the Band-Aid off of companies that, maybe they didn't want to spend the money for a college grad that knows a lot about not just about Excel spreadsheets, but they know about social media, right? They know what the trends are and the keywords and the hashtags, and even myself. I mean, I'm a step behind everything because I don't engage on TikTok, but that's a lot of information gets passed out there as well. So it's a really interesting place to be, having put on in-person shows for the last 20 years and seeing brand building on a more virtual stage.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because I would think that'd have a real impact kind of on audience and kind of what people expect, because, you've really kind of got this almost invisible digital thing going on outside of your trade show event, right? Yeah.
And I think that if you ask and you talk to a lot of guys, and we'll talk about fly fishing retailer, back in early 2000s, I think a lot of manufacturers, came out with a lot of orders. It was an order writing show. Product was, and fly fishing is a little bit different than the conventional market, where it was more dealer direct, right? So manufacturers are dealing directly with their dealers and through manufacturers reps, and so fly fishing retailer was a real buying show, and that was a migration and change in that, and it became more of a media show. But that was the trend with all the outdoor shows, OR, and ICAST specifically, became a lot more of a media show as opposed to a buying show. And so, it's a new way to look at things. And, IFTD is one of those, it's a great place to see product. And we really want people to come and enjoy the experience, but also know that they can still get out of coming to the show, but they can't get in a virtual experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, because, the fly fishing industry has really diversified, right? So it's gone from a trout-based kind of fly fishing economy to, now people are fishing for everything. And I would imagine that makes it a lot more difficult to kind of have that one show that solves everything.
Yeah, you'd like it to be that, especially that IFTD is, produced by AFFTA, the association that represents, the, recreational fly fishing industry and manufacturers and guides and, and retailers. But yeah, it is. It's definitely one of those situations where things change. It changed so quickly that it's kind of spun everybody on its head. But it is something that we can, if we all kind of come together and talk about what it looks like going forward, I think we can have a pretty good outcome, especially this year.
Yeah, and so talking about like let's just say you pick the constituencies at the trade show out and say it's basically kind of maybe based on the membership categories in the organization, and you're the event promoter. How do you make sure you check all the boxes for all the people?
Well, I think that you have to ask, right? One of my biggest conversations, that I have with Lucas and others in the board and the show committee is, and these are not just my conversations or my points of view, but everyone. I said, I think that we need to just ask the community and the membership, what is it that is going to best serve the membership, and not just the membership, but the greater industry, because not everybody that's in fly fishing is a member of AFFTA, right? And so the idea is to appeal to those who aren't members and fortify those who are members, and kind of move forward together so that we can continue to have a great community where trade and advocacy are locked hand in hand.
Yeah, and kind of building on that, and we talked a little bit about some of the COVID things, but how do you see kind of the needs of exhibitors and dealers kind of shifting over time? Like, how has that been, let's say, the last 10 or 15 years?
I think, one idea is to kind of give them is to give dealers a platform, and give them and we've done the dealer summit in the past, and it's been separate from IFTD. And I think, moving forward, I think, it's the dealer summit for this year is the day before IFTD. So it's a day of seminars, Tuesday, March 29th in Salt Lake. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is the IFTD show. And I know that you're going to be hosting a panel on both days. But I think, is just focusing on, the needs of what the dealers are, and, and having the manufacturers being a part of that conversation. But knowing that, this marketing evolution is kind of changing now. And, we're trade shows have kind of evolved from buying shows to media shows. What can we do now as we gather? What can we talk about that's going to make a difference moving forward, knowing that information is being passed on virtual platforms, right? And so there'll be a combination of that. But you can't deny the fact that consumers have now become a huge part. I mean, obviously they're at the, it's the market, it's the part of the media trail that you want, or the tail that you want to reach. But they're just as knowledgeable now coming out just because of social media, because of YouTube. These are all we can't hide from it. We can't say, hey, no, consumers can't be a part of this because they're already a part of this. And so I think looking forward, we now look at media. We have to look at manufacturers. We have to look at retailers, and we have to look at consumers, as well as obviously guides and media. But that's really going to create a community that it'll be a little bit more cohesive, right? And I think that we're looking into doing something like that here after IFTD.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I mean, there's almost an old analog component, right? Which the networking and kind of gathering information, I think in some ways that kind of industry intelligence, you really need to kind of get in person, right? I don't think there's an Instagram substitute for that. And I think particularly coming out of COVID, talking to manufacturer friends of mine, they really kind of missed getting that kind of industry intelligence just by going out and being able to talk to a lot of different people all over the industry in one place.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. It's just all about moderation, right? That's, I think, what's happening here. And I think there were a lot of people before COVID. They all pined and said, "Hey, I can do my job from work. I just want to work from home. Can I go work from home?" I used to have employees. They would say, "Man, can I just work from home?" I'm like, you got to let me know in advance because I've got to tell my boss that why you're not here. And so COVID happened, and then people are like, "Well, wait a second, you can work effectively from home, right?" But after 2 years of Zoom calls, I don't think there's anybody that hasn't had Zoom fatigue, right? And I think there's a lot of people that said, "Hey, yeah, you know what? It was great to work from home, but I need that interaction. I need that feeling of like talking to a teammate or talking to my boss or my employee or just coworker in person." So, I think there's a nice balance in there of what we can do with an industry event moving forward that has a little bit of everything for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's not impossible, but I think it's really difficult to mentor virtually. And I think it's really difficult to mentor new people virtually.
Yeah, there's no question. I think you're 100% right. And I don't want anyone to think that, for 20 years I've been putting on industry trade shows to move over to a virtual platform, because that's not it. I think that we need to figure out how to use virtual platforms or social media or YouTube, these conduits to the consumer to our benefit, right? But still gather, still have that the strength and numbers and understanding, and just celebrate fly fishing. There's a lot of great people in this industry, and it's not all about one person. It's not even about 2 or 3 people. It's just kind of collectively as a group celebrating a passion, that we all love and enjoy. And we want it. And we're the fortunate guys that get to make a living at it, and I think that's something to continue to work on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. And I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but, looking at the Dealer Summit is really a vehicle to help, manufacturers invest in their retail network, right? And to teach them how to be better. And it kind of works out for everybody.
Yeah. And I think, what the big thing is, is content, right? It could be, we can have these dealer summits and these faraway places and, beautiful locations and have some great content, and people will come. I think, really what we've learned, especially through COVID, is that people are thirsty for content, whether, and knowledge. And that is, the dealer summit's one of those ways to get to the dealer, that manufacturers can kind of like say, "Hey, let's bounce some things off of you and find out what's the sweet spot here and what you're looking for."
Yeah, absolutely. And, most trade shows that I've seen are kind of tied to trade associations. And I was really curious, Ken, to get your thoughts on, how a trade association should support its members.
Well, again, with ICAST, the one big thing, one of the big things I learned early, again, is that, it's not just about one person. You really got to ask the question. You've got to go through committee. You got to go through boards. You have to have those individual conversations, and, people, that might be upset about the show, they just want to be heard, and for the longest time, I heard, all I ever heard was that this is all about the big guys. And I said, no. I said, I'll be honest with you. It's not about the big guys, because I'm for the little guys, and I would tell them, and we go through this story about how, I worked with Yeti, I worked with Z-Man, I've worked with all of these brand, these brands, and they started small. And we worked on business plans and looking down the line. Now I didn't help them come up with those things, but the encouragement there was that we wanted to create a forum that would allow for small entrepreneurial businesses grow their passion or their product or their idea and be a part of something bigger. And that's really where it is. I mean, that's what we're doing here with IFTD. We have a lot of, manufacturers who produce, just a few SKUs or UPCs they don't even have UPCs. They just have products, and they're limited in that. And they can make a living out of doing that. We want to help grow that and grow their brand and find ways to do that through the show and the association.
Yeah. And so, you've got the trade show piece. But then, what about the things that aren't related to the trade show? I mean, what are the other things that you think an association should be doing?
Well, again, it's the membership, the association serves its membership. And if I haven't said it twice already, I'll say it again. It's not any one person's idea or vision about where to take the fly fishing industry, right? This is a collective bargaining issue where the membership gets a voice and they can be a part of a committee, they can be a part of the board, and they can help drive the association in the industry, right? To greener pastures and growth. And so I think, there's a lot of things from my perspective. I'm really focused on the trade side. So knowing that I can evolve the industry event, staying away now, kind of calling IFTD a trade show, but more of an industry event, and moving it to while we have kind of seminars and content and a B2B concept there, we're looking at, talking to influencers and consumers and building your brand through those different social media and virtual platforms. So from a trade perspective, that's really, if I could take what I know and my experience and listen to what the needs are for members, then and do that for them, then that's what will serve our members better.
Got it. And we've kind of been touching on this a little bit, but we haven't really taken the deep dive. And, everybody in the fly fishing industry knows that, IFTD is going to be in late March and the beginning of April in Salt Lake City. You want to let folks know a little bit about the event?
Yeah. So we were originally staging for October 21st of last year, or October 2021, sorry. Of last year, and then Delta hit, and we postponed the show to March. And I will say to your listeners who are in the fly fishing industry and have an opportunity to come to IFTD, that the March deadline, the March date, is the earliest date that we could put the show, instead of waiting all the way to the following year. And there was a lot of like I said earlier, my job is to create relationships. All of them are fiduciary in nature, and a lot of contracts were written, and there were some cancellation fees. And so, in order to mitigate those fees, we had to accept a show that was going to be at a time when IFTD typically isn't, which is at the end of Q1. Beginning of Q2. So, it's going to be March 30th through April 1st. We have a great lineup. We have the Dealer Summit, March 29th. Registration's open. We have a great floor plan. I think that, waiting on a couple of contracts, but all the spaces are on hold. So we are essentially sold out on the show floor. And it's just, registration's picking up. I think the Denver show, the Ferinsky shows, while they're not related to us, Atlanta was a good show, and the Denver show was great. I think, as far as attendance. And the one thing that we heard back, the feedback that I got, is that, they wanted to see the big guys, and I think that's something that, we can take into IFTD. And I think there's a lot of retailers that are going to come, are starting to sign up after the show, just kind of get that juice, to get that tank full, of energy about, gathering again. So we're on track to do, pretty well as far as attendance, and media signing up. We've got a great media lineup, coming in, and a lot of content, and just, hey, just a lot of shaking hands and saying hello and doing it again after 2.5 years.
Yeah. And I know too, speaking of the big guys, I know Sims is going to be there. You want to kind of run through kind of the bigger guys that maybe, didn't make the consumer shows in 2022 that are going to be at IFTD.
Yeah. So we've got Barbank and Sims. Let's see, hang on one second. I don't want to leave anybody out here. We got Orvis, SA, Rec, REC. We got Teen Footwear, a new exhibitor for this year. Yakima, Waterworks, Siegler. There's quite a good bit of companies that have decided that they were going to stick with the show after the Delta fiasco of 21. But it's a lot of smaller companies that are going to be there too. That guys who've just been at the show, and they wanted, they want to gather, and that's really kind of what a lot of the feedback that I've been getting from some of our exhibitors who have been exhibiting with us for a long time. Ross Reels, Airflow, Oros, Mystic Outdoors. We have some conservation groups. We have Conservation Corner. We have, Bonefish Tarp and Trust, Captains for Clean Water, Bahio, Costa. And so R.L. Winston, Scott, there's so many. We have a full spectrum of product. And so apparel guys are going to be there. Howler Brothers, everybody loves Howler, Rick. And so St. Croix, Monic, a new exhibitor, Turtle Box Audio. We have some apps. On Water app is going to be there. So yeah, no, we're looking pretty good. I'd be remiss if I didn't say my good friends over at Yeti. But we've got everybody from, small 10x10s to international brands. Yeah. So we're looking forward to a good show. Yeah,
and if you guys go over to the website at AFFTA's website, you can see the exhibitor list because it's all posted there, and there's some really great. You're talking about the big guys, but there's some great small guys there. I think Flyvines is going to be there again. I think Flytrap is going to be there. So it's going to be a really good show, and obviously this is the first trade shows for AFFTA since COVID. What should exhibitors and attendees expect?
Well, we are not going to be at pre-pandemic levels, right? While the show floor is going to be there, it's just kind of like getting it back up, getting our feet back underneath us, and kind of walking before we start running again. And I think I think probably one of the bigger takeaways that people should get from the show is the question of what does this look like moving forward, right? And I think everybody that's there will have a voice and a platform to say, hey, we want an industry event, but maybe we don't want it in a convention center. Maybe we want it outdoor and have a practical space, or maybe we want it in a resort location. But what we need to do is to get feedback from those who are attending from the membership and the industry as a whole to find out, how that looks moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you and I have talked about this multiple times. You try to figure out how much of the change is COVID, right? And how much of the change COVID accelerated, and then, what's going to bounce back and what's the new normal going to look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's difficult to say, I think no one has a crystal ball. No one had a crystal ball before. What the reality is that prior to COVID, that there was a call from the industry to change what was, what IFTD was, right? Which is a traditional trade show. It's going to evolve. It's going to be something different. I hope everybody's going to be happy about it. And I think that, with the help that, the feedback that we get from the show, and from here on, moving forward, we have an opportunity to really kind of come up with something that's going to be more meaningful to the industry.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I think to survive in the industry, people have had to become more digitally adept, right? Because that was the only option for the last 2 years. And I guess the question is, going forward, how do people want to use those new muscles they built? Right.
Exactly.
So, it's kind of funny. I'm looking at my questions and I was going to ask you about the greatest challenge you had organizing the event, but I tell you what, because I'm feeling generous, I'm going to give you 3 challenges.
3 challenges?
Yeah. Just the top things, right. That made you pull your hair out. Well,
so I think the first one is exhibitor engagement, right? Because with trade shows, it's kind of the chicken or the egg, right? You got to have attendees in order to come, or buyers in order to get exhibitors, and you have to have exhibitors, to get attendees. And I think, trying to herd cats in that way and just timing that little picture or that window shot of what the floor looks like or what the exhibitor list looks like is really kind of the hardest part. So I'd say, talking to manufacturers and delivering, right? And then reaching out to retailers or buyers, and delivering to them as well, a diverse product. That doesn't have to be the core. The core has to be there, but a nice spectrum of products that they can take back to their shop, that, they can have coolers and apparel and other things that will help them stand out from their competitor in their space. The third would be media. And media, anybody that knows me in the media knows that I've really worked hard to have a great relationship with them. Been very open with them. It's changed a lot. There's been some trade changes in trade publications, from I think there were 4 at one time, and now there's, 3 big ones that, or 3 of them have gone virtual, and, one's still printing, and it's just, everything's kind of shifting, but, that continuing to be available and transparent to the media, gives them content, and it helps them sell magazines, subscriptions, and advertisements. So I'd say that's the triumvirate right there. Those are the 3, the 3 things that kind of keep me up at night, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. And, just to kind of put a bow on the present, for a variety of reasons, and we've touched on this a little bit, exhibitors and attendees who've attended in the past are a little bit unsure, and, they've gotten some kind of positive feedback from the Atlanta Fly Fishing Show and the Denver Fly Fishing Show. But, what do you want to tell them about why they should plan to attend in Salt Lake City?
Well, again, I think that retailers, we'd love to have retailers at the show, and we know that we can't talk to every single one of them. And everybody has reasons why that they can't come. And, for the most part, a lot of it is timing or COVID or, the objections aren't just that they don't want to come. What I do want to do is to make sure that those who are coming and the ones who are thinking about coming know that we do have some great content, great educational forums, and aside from the typical networking opportunities, and the ability just to kind of gather, this is a real opportunity to have your voice heard, and let us know, manufacturers know, hey, this is what we want to see moving forward. And it's if we have consumers in part of this event moving forward, it's not going to be a buying show, right? It's just going to be more of education and reaching out to these influencers and marketing and on digital media and social platforms. And so it's not a thing where if you don't vote, you can't talk, right? It's just, we want you to be there to be a part of it and feel the energy of being at the show and recognize the things that, hey, this is what we like and this is what we'd like to change and moving forward.
Yeah, got it. And what's the best place for folks to go to get the latest information on the event?
So you can go to the AFFTA.org website. There's a drop down for IFTD 2022. In the drop down, there's an attendee page. And if you're an exhibitor, there's also an exhibitor page. But all the information's in there as far as registration links. There's housing or hotel links with discounted rates for the show. I think we have Delta, and we have a car, Hertz discounts as well. The greatest thing about Salt Lake is the hotels are everything's very close, right? The hotels are much cheaper than some of the other venues around the country. The airport is less than a 10-minute Uber ride, but you can also take, I forget, I think it's like $3. It might even be less. Take a train from the airport to the convention center. There's great food. There's great places to go and meet. But yeah, no, there's a Salt Lake setting up to be a great location for IFTD.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the rail thing is awesome. I know it was that way in Denver too for the last one. And, before I let you go, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners kind of on the AFFTA front that's not related to IFTD?
Yeah, I think, I think membership is doing well. I think we've got a lot of people who are signing up, which is to be members of AFFTA, who aren't necessarily coming to the show, which is great support for the association. We're doing a Lucas Bissett is new executive director, who's doing a great job in communicating to past and current and new members. But yeah, no, I think that we've got a great opportunity to come together. And I will say this: I am, working for ASA and in the larger fishing industry. I'm always so envious of the fly fishing industry, and then a lot of guys who know me that I've always wanted to work for AFFTA. And I love fly fishing. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about moving fly fishing forward, and my best way to do that is to help with the trade show. And so I just don't want people to miss an opportunity to join the show and be a part of something that it's your community, it's your show, it's your association, and we welcome you to be a part of it in Salt Lake later next month.
Yeah, and to kind of keep track of all that sort of stuff, you want to share with folks maybe the best ways to kind of follow AFFTA and IFTD on social?
Yeah, I mean, so we're on Instagram and Facebook. I think it's IFTD. Oh my gosh,
it's okay. I'll drop all that stuff in the show notes.
Yeah. So you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook.
Very cool. Well, Ken, I really appreciate you taking some time away from your bourbon to talk to me this evening from Mobile, Alabama. Well,
it's always good to talk to someone from home, and I know you're on the other side of running it for me was growing up, but it feels like home. So I appreciate you having me.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of funny. So just in case folks you don't understand, Ken and I basically grew up probably 45 minutes away from each other, just on separate sides of the mountain.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that my wife was listening. We were listening to the podcast the other day, and my wife was like, "Wow, he kind of talks like you." And I said, "That's because we're both from Virginia, and I know it's a little bit. You're a little bit more Piedmont, but it's great. It is. It's always fun talking to you, Marvin.
Yeah.
And I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little bit farther away from West Virginia. That's what it is.
That's true. This isn't bourbon, so
there you go. Well, listen, Ken, I really appreciate it. Have a good evening.
All right, thanks so much.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Again, if you like the podcast, please tell a friend and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. Tight lines, everybody.